Hi, guys. Welcome to the Simple Doesn't Mean Easy podcast. We are here working at simplifying things in our lives one day at a time, one simple step at a time. I know this way of simplifying things, working and eliminating some junk in our lives, it doesn't make things easier, but it definitely makes it better. I'm your host, Michelle Visser, and today we're talking about something we don't often talk about. But if you are a pet lover, as I am, I think this episode is going to intrigue you because I know we're always talking about real food. And I know if you have specifically today we're talking about dogs, but if you have a pet that it's a special part of your family, yeah, and we don't always think about our pets' food as much as we do about our own. And I'll be honest with you, I'm going to stop right here and tell you that's a good thing. I personally, as much as I love pets, I do not put them up on some crazy high pedestal. Kind of concerns me today the way that the younger generation is kind of that sounded so pompous of me. The younger generation. That's not what I meant. But just recently, I've seen more of people referring to themselves as pet parents and referring to their dogs as their kids. And I mean, I kind of get it. It's kind of cute, but I mean, I'm not somebody who puts animals as high as kids in my view. I mean, my kids are my backbone of my family. They're so important to me. And I would never say that my dogs, Bixby and Selah, are on equal par with my kids. It just isn't the case. But I do absolutely adore Bixby and Selah. And I can't imagine on a day to day basis not having them with me here around the farm and just hanging out in the house. And as I'm working, one or the other one of them is by my side. And I adore them. So they are important to me. And when we got Selah as a puppy, which was a little over a year ago now, um, I really started thinking even more about the food that I wanted to feed our dogs. I had already went through quite a process with Bixby years before that, and I had found a kibble that I really did like, um, and it fit my price point. That was the hard thing for me, that I just can't justify spending way too much on dog food. It's more important to me to spend all that money on our family's food, and I don't usually have enough money to allocate to spending a lot on both. So with Bixby, I spent years looking at different kibbles and feeding him what I knew was subpar, and I wasn't happy with it, but it fit my budget. And then I came across a kibble that I really loved, and I was so excited that it is the high standards it has without being in that high price point. So I did find a good kibble that I liked. And you know what? Instead of like whatever I mentioned today that's dog related, any products, instead of listing off all the things, I'll just leave all the links for you in one place. If you want to go to solelyrested.com/dog, you can find everything I mentioned today that is dog related. And all of it is Bixby and Selah approved. I can tell you that. So solelyrested.com/dog, DOG. Um, so I went through that process, but I then learned that kibble loses no matter how great the kibble is, even if you get the most expensive kibble. It loses about 40% of its nutrients when it's processed. And that made sense to me. The more that I've learned about food preservation, the more I've learned that the more what's the word I want to use? The more invasive that your preserving method is, the more nutrients that you lose. It's just the way it works. And I think I've shared before that I am not a fan of canning. Those of you who are, I have high regards for you. I think it's amazing, the women that are friends of mine that put up all this food and they have shelves and shelves full of jars of fresh food that they've canned. I'm always impressed, but it's not me. I hate canning. I've done it many times and I hate it every time I do it. I just don't enjoy it. The whole process of the boiling pans on the stove and all the time that it takes to prepare the food and prepare the jars and then add pressure canner into it and yuck. Yuck. I hate it. So I when I learned that not only was it something I didn't enjoy doing, but you lose 60 to 80% of your food's nutrients when you're canning it. I was like, well, why am I doing something I hate so much then? Like, there's got to be a better way. So I spent a lot of time perfecting the process of dehydrating to the point that it was the way was perfect for my family, for the foods that we dehydrate. And I don't know if I've mentioned, I think, yeah, I've mentioned on here in the last episode, right? That I put together Dehydrating Academy. The doors are open. Please go check it out. Please go to the show notes for the special discount, or just go to soullyrested.com/dehydrate and check out what it's all about. Although I don't think the discount code isn't going to be listed there because this is just for you guys. This is just for podcast listeners. So it is code podcast, and that will save you a sweet savings on Dehydrating Academy at soullyrested.com/dehydrate. So when I figured out how much better our dehydrated food is for us. By the way, it retains, usually it depends, there's variance depending on the food and if you pre-treat it and the temperatures you dehydrate it at. But for the most part, about 97% of the nutrients are maintained in your dried dehydrated food. So, as I learned all of that, it made perfect sense when I discovered something that got me so excited when we had Selah for just a month or two. Um, Let me backtrack for a second. I had taken her to the vet. We have a holistic vet that I absolutely love. And I was chatting with her about, I need to figure out a food. I'm just using the puppy food that she came with from her breeder, but it's not like the best. It's not really what I want. And I'm really thinking about real food. Like, can I feed her real food? So we talked about a raw food diet, and she was all for it. Her number one thing she recommends is a raw food diet for all of her dogs that come to see her. And she even has once a month a delivery made to her office. And you can go pick up your box full of the right amount of food for your dog. You order it ahead of time. And so I was really strongly considering that. But as I really thought through the whole process, as I looked at my lack of freezer space to hold a month's worth of dog food, and as I looked at the cost, and I thought about the process of going to pick up this food every month, all of it combined, I was still trying to convince myself because I really wanted to do the right thing for the dogs, especially now that I had this sweet puppy that was pulling on my heartstrings, and um, so I was really close to the raw food thing, but I just couldn't make the leap. I think the main thing was the freezer space, honestly. Like, I just couldn't get over. I had to figure out how to store this every month until it was time for her to eat it each day. And then I discovered something that kind of changed this dog owner's heart and life forever. Like, it's crazy. I discovered that they make dehydrated raw dog food. So you have all the benefits of the raw food, maintaining, I'm assuming, 97% of the nutrients or more, just like in people food, because it is people food. So I don't have to say I'm assuming, I know. Maintains almost all the nutrients. You have all the benefit of the raw food, but it's convenient and it's dehydrated and it's like life changing. It's shelf stable. So, anyway, before I explain, well, I don't know if I even need to explain more about that. Just go to soullyrested.com/dog and you'll see what I'm talking about. I will show it to you. If you if you're watching on YouTube, you will see what I'm talking about. If you're not, don't worry, I'll just describe it to you. This is a bag of the raw dog food, and it looks like, let's see, some out. It looks like beef jerky. You can see that on the screen. And it's the consistency of a soft kibble, I guess you would say, because you can easily break it. It's not like bendable like some jerky is. And the smell is crazy amazing. It's because it's all real food. So that is what dehydrated dog food looks like. And the dogs love it, as of course I assumed they would. Um, but I'm going ahead of myself because what I really wanted to do this episode was break down. I always get in trouble when I just sit down and chat with you guys. I do have a list in front of me so I don't forget my 4 points, but I don't like have many notes at all. And I'm just chatting with you. And I always get into trouble when I do that, in the sense that I just kind of go on for too long. And I'm sorry that I got sidetracked because what I really wanted to start with was my 4 points. And these are 4 questions that I started asking of dog food companies when I was debating raw food or kibble. And I thought, if I'm not doing raw food, I didn't know yet about this dehydrated food. If I'm looking at kibble, what am I looking for? What am I going to require to decide what really is the best choice if I can't handle the inconvenience of the raw food? So these are the 4 questions that I narrowed down to. And I'm going to share with you why these 4 questions, and then I'm going to share with you how the dehydrated dog food specifically answered those questions for me. So here we go. Number one, um, let's see. To know, this is what my note said above it. To know if your dog's food is actually giving him or her any nutrition or just future illness and vet trips, here are the 4 questions I decided to ask about my dog's food. And that is something, I'm glad I just read my note because that I would have forgotten to tell you. That is something that I started to understand and realize that I am going to, if I'm not paying a little bit more now for their food, for the good, better stuff at least, then I am going to pay it in vet bills later. I am going to see a lot of problems in their health. I know so many friends that have had such high bills for different things and problems that probably could have been avoided if they started improving the food. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So, the first question, is it a good source of protein? Protein is so important for humans and for dogs. The protein in your chosen food should be listed first, and it should be listed by name. You should know what is the protein source. If it says beef or chicken or any other meat, then it's probably a good indicator that it's probably at least a decent food. That's a good place to start. If it doesn't say beef or chicken or some other meat, then you can probably move on and keep looking. But if it says meat byproducts, don't let that fool you. Or if it says poultry, notice I said chicken is good. If it says poultry, you probably want to move on because that food is going to be filled, both of those things, the meat byproducts and the poultry, it's going to be filled with a lot of less than desirable parts of the animal. Like I'm talking the beaks and the feathers. And it's all going to be mixed together in that bag of food. And we're going to get on to another point in a minute that I'll expand on this idea. But depending on where this food is coming from, those feathers and those beaks and all of that, they haven't been cleaned in any way. Those are, and they could be full of lots of nasty stuff. So if it says byproducts or poultry, move on. Second question, is it a good source of nutritious fat? We have talked on here in previous episodes. It's one of my favorite things to talk about is fat and high quality fat and how fat is not an enemy. It is so good for us. We need fat as humans. And it's the same thing for our dogs. They absolutely need fat. It's important. Um, in the show notes, I will leave some links to some of those episodes about fat because if you haven't listened to those, you don't know what I'm talking about why fat is a good thing in your diet, definitely go give them a listen. It's life changing, it's eye opening, it's really good stuff, guys. So, fats are an essential energy source for your dog. While the minimum amount of fat that's required in kibble for adult maintenance is about 5 to 6%, that's actually kind of absurd because that's such a low amount of protein. But if you read on different expert sites or different vet sites, that's typically what you'll find that they say, oh, about 5 to 6% fat is important in their food. But I personally, I would never accept less than, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10%, but that would still not be enough. A dog's diet should actually be 50% meat and 40% um, of that should be protein and 20% of fat is ideal. So you really need at least 20% of fat. But if you can find a dog food that has a good source of protein and more fat than that, you are getting close to something that is probably a golden choice for your dog. Let's take a quick second and talk about what time of year it is. Cold and flu season is knocking at the door, and I love to rely on natural adaptogens now more than ever. Adaptogens are plants and parts of plants, they're herbs, they're the roots, the flowers, the berries of the plant, and they support our body's response to stress and to illness. Many of the active compounds in adaptogens actually help our immune system defend itself. The flavonoids, the amino acids, the minerals that you're going to find in any kind of herbal remedy is going to make it an excellent boost for whatever you're doing in your day to help you fight colds and flus. So instead of popping pills or just bearing with the seasonal cold and yuckiness, go to solelyrested.com/fall, FALL. Try out one or all of the delicious medicinal drink recipes that I share there. These are my favorite things to drink in the fall, and they're made from organic teas and medicinal botanicals. They're super easy to make, and I even have discount codes waiting for you there so you can try some of these drinks yourself. solelyrested.com/fall, FALL. Okay, guys, if we're concerned about the nutrient quality of our food, we really need to think about the nutrient quality of our soil if we're growing some of our own food as well. I really can't recommend cover crops enough. They've kind of revolutionized the way that I garden. Cover crops are a living mulch. They suppress weeds, they attract beneficial insects, they control erosion, they hold moisture into the soil, and when the cover crops decay, they give nutrients back to the soil. So those nutrients are there and ready for my garden next spring. Go to solelyrested.com/cover and find out what cover crops I recommend. Also, you'll find a really great cover crop guide that I link to at solelyrested.com/cover. The next question to ask, this is what I alluded at a second ago, where is the dog food made? I like for my food to be made in the USA whenever possible. My dog's food. I mean, my food too. um, but you'd be surprised how many different dog foods companies either source from China or outright make it in China. But be careful because they could say that it's made in the USA, but they're just reassembling stuff that they've brought over on cargo ships from China. So that is certainly possible. But needless to say, the standards in other countries are typically very subpar, even lower than our own standards here in the US when it comes to dog food. So it's a good thing to think about. And a lot of companies come across as being American companies, but they're not sourcing their ingredients from the US. Now, the fourth question is, what's the source of the food that has been made into dog food? So not only where is the food coming from and where's it made, like the actual dog kibble or whatever the food is, but what's the source of that original food that was changed into the dog food? Does that make sense? I don't feel like I'm making sense. In my brain, I'm making sense. So I buy 2 different dog foods and I mix them. Actually, I still get the kibble. I'll show you some of it here. I got a little handful of it. The dogs looked at me like, "What is she doing?" As I headed into the podcast recording studio with my dog food in my hand. But this, if you're on YouTube, you can see is Bixby's. Is the kibble I got for Bixby years ago, and I still feed this to both of the dogs. It is a good quality kibble at a really great price. But the reason I'm showing it to you is, okay, it's kind of cutesy, right? They make it into 2 shapes, so that's kind of cute, but it's not colored. It has no artificial colors. It is just the actual color of the food that, is made into the kibble. So, um, that's one thing. I was actually feeding Bixby food before this that had 3 different colors of dye because I guess the company thinks isn't that great to make it look pretty. But my dog doesn't care what color the food is. I don't care what color the food is, right? So that was one thing that I knew I was on the right track with this kibble for Bixby when I noticed, oh, they don't have artificial colors in the dog food. So anyway, I buy 2 different dog foods and I mix them together, and they're both made in the USA. So that makes me happy to know that. But even better, I know I actually was not able to find the source of the original food for this, at least that I can remember. I must have found it way back when, but it wasn't memorable to me, whatever it was. It was probably in the US. I hope so. But I did find the source of this kibble that I showed you. This kibble is actually made from farms in the Midwest in the US. And they tell you what farms it comes from if you ask the company or look into that and do some research. So there are local family farms in the Midwest that are providing the food for this dog food. So that's pretty cool. And then as far as where is it's actually made or manufactured in, New Jersey is one of them. I think I have that in my notes. Where is it manufactured? New Jersey is one of the states I know. Wow. I thought I had that in my notes. Hmm. Well, it's 2 states in the US where it is manufactured, coming from the Midwest for the food. Okay. I guess I don't have it. I'm still looking through my notes, but I guess I don't have that here. Okay. So anyway, do a little research, guys. It's really not too hard. You can just do Google the right things, ask these questions and search the answers about your dog food or ones you're considering buying for your dog. And um, if you can't find the information, then you might want to switch. Like if you can't find it in a Google search, then you might want to try to reach out to the company. And if they don't provide the information, they can't answer these questions, then I would argue they're not being transparent and you might want to keep looking and find a better food. Um, they're simple questions, but the answers really can make a world of difference for your dog's health and they really can shrink your bills, your vet bills in the future. So in the end, you really could be saving money. Oh, here, I kept scrolling. I found it's Ohio. Human grade kitchens in Ohio and New Jersey are where they make the kibble that, or not the kibble, the dehydrated food. Okay, so the reason I found that is I did write here my answers that I found to these 4 questions about the dehydrated food that I feed the dogs. First of all, it is not only meets and exceeds the protein requirements. That was the first question we talked about, but it's human grade, all natural food. So there's not going to be any beaks or feathers from birds that are kept poorly over in China. And there's lots of organ meat. I love that about this kibble because organ meat is so good. It's good for us too. We just don't eat it that much. I'm not a fan of liver, but I have figured out a way to add liver to our food though. That's delicious. I'll leave a link to that in the comments, in the show notes, because it's called Pluck and it is amazing. And I also have a savings code for you that I will leave in the show notes. And it is a way to add liver and other organ meat to your food. In fact, I'll also link the previous episode from a while back that talked a lot about this. So, organ meat is so essential for our health and definitely for our dog's health as well. So, I love it that this food has a lot of organ meat. So, that's something you can check with the food you're feeding your dog and ask, is there some organ meat in there? And then the second question, remember we had said a dog's diet should be 50% more. Oh, I might not have said it this way. Did I say it this way? This is the right way. I should have said it when I was rambling. A dog's diet should be 50% more meat than fat. So they should have 40% protein, 20% fat. That's an ideal situation. And for the kibble, that is, I keep calling it kibble, for the dehydrated dog food, it is 43% protein, 21% fat. So that's crazy, amazing, good. That made me really happy when I discovered that. And to answer the third question, where is it actually made? The food, it's actually made in human grade kitchens because everything in this food is actually human grade food. It's made in human grade kitchens in the Ohio and New Jersey. And finally, where is the food sourced from? I already told you that. Local family farms in the Midwest was the answer that I got when I did some research on that. So trust me, if you do the research, you will find the answers. So take these 4 questions, go to you know, online or your company that makes your dog food and just ask these questions. And you might be wonderfully surprised and go, yay, I feel really good about what I'm feeding my dog and I'm saving money on future vet bills and health problems that our dog might have. Or you might get some answers that are subpar. And then hopefully you can just kind of start the process again with a different option, or go to solelyrested.com/dog. And I'm happy to share with you what I have found and what I have settled on as truly the best food sources for Bixby and Selah. So I think that's it. Um, I also have some enrichment toys, by the way, on that page. Selah and Bixby love when I get out the enrichment toys and I feed them one of their meals through this toy, and there's different ones. They love them. And that's another reason that I do also still use kibble, not just the dehydrated dog food. Also, you know what? Kibble is harder and it gives them much more of a crunch on their teeth, which is really good for their dental health too. So I really like feeding them both of these foods, but the kibble works better in their enrichment toys. So anyway, make your dog happy. Go see what Bixby and Selah love. Bixby and Selah would love that. They say your dog needs it. Solelyrested.com/dog. And that's it for today, guys. Thanks for listening. Remember, it's easy to forget how blessed we are to live this life. So enjoy the simple everyday efforts. It's not easy, but it's a good life.